My name is Vivian Reyes. I'm 31 years old, and on my wedding day, I walked myself down the aisle. Not because I wanted to, but because my father chose my sister instead. He did it right in front of everyone. The processional music had already begun. My sister stood at the entrance with her arm threaded through his, tilting her head the way she always did when she wanted to look delicate. My mother grabbed my wrist before I could move. Her hold was firmer than I expected. "She's going through a hard breakup," she murmured. "Don't make a scene." I stood frozen in the doorway in my gown, clutching a bouquet that seemed to grow heavier by the second. Then a man stepped out from the shadows of the hallway. I didn't know his face. He offered his arm silently, gently, as though he'd practiced this moment for years. When my father turned and saw who stood beside me, every drop of color drained from his face. The room fell into total silence. Then it broke wide open. I'm Vivian, and this is the story of the man my father spent 24 years erasing from my life. And what happened the day he finally returned. Let me take you back to where it all started. I want to be exact about what kind of household we presented to the world, or at least what it looked like from outside. A spacious home in a peaceful suburb of Cleveland. My stepfather, Marcus, held a position that sounded impressive whenever guests came over. My mother ran our household like clockwork, every holiday, birthday, and school event planned down to the minute, leaving no space for spontaneity or unspoken emotion. Marcus Whitfield was not my real father. I'd known that my whole life. What I never knew, what I was kept from knowing, was anything genuine about the man who actually was. The story handed to me was tidy. My biological father abandoned us before I turned 2. He struggled with addiction. He was unreliable. A judge ruled him unfit, and he gave up his rights without protest. Neat, final, told with a tone that warned against asking more. I was 5 when my mother remarried. 7 when Marcus formally adopted me. Nobody asked how I felt about any of it. I just remember being coached to say thank you. My sister was born when I was 8. Her arrival felt like a reset button for the whole family. Marcus smiled more often. My mother's laughter came easier. And slowly, without quite having the language for it, I understood that my role in this family differed from hers. She was cherished. I was handled. I don't say that out of resentment. It took years to land on the right description, but that's exactly what it was. I moved away for nursing school at 18 and never returned home for good. There was no big dramatic exit. It was just clear, the way certain truths become clear once you've gained enough distance to see what you left behind. I built a life for myself in Columbus and became an ICU nurse, the kind of skill that only comes from learning early how to read tension in a room, how to stay composed when things fall apart, how to comfort someone without making it about your own feelings. The hospital taught me plenty, but honestly, I already knew most of those lessons before I ever wore scrubs. I went home for Christmas when I could manage it. I called on birthdays. I kept what my mother referred to as closeness, and what I privately called controlled distance, just enough contact to maintain peace, never enough to get swallowed whole. Then I met Caleb. Caleb Reese was a legal aid attorney, patient almost to a fault, endlessly curious, and physically incapable of leaving a room without making sure everyone in it felt okay. He made me laugh freely. More than that, he let me stop performing wellness around him. We dated for 2 years before he proposed, doing it quietly in our kitchen one Sunday morning. No witnesses, no fanfare, just him, a ring, and a particular kind of stillness that told me he was staying for good. I said yes without hesitation. Planning the wedding is where the cracks began to show. My mother was eager to get involved. Marcus offered to cover the venue, which felt generous until I realized it came with an expectation of input on every decision. My sister assumed she'd be a bridesmaid, then upgraded herself to bridesmaid with extra authority, then practically co-planner. I gave in more than I should have, the way you do when you've spent your whole life calculating the cost of keeping peace. But I held firm on one thing. I asked Marcus to walk me down the aisle. He agreed instantly, no hesitation, no strings attached. He was standing in his kitchen, holding a glass of whiskey when he said it. And in that moment, he looked like the father I'd spent 31 years hoping I actually had. I built the entire wedding around that one yes. Caleb understood my history better than almost anyone. He listened the way he always did, without trying to fix things, without rushing to fill silence. But in the weeks leading up to the wedding, I'd catch a strange stillness cross his face whenever my family came up. like he was carefully holding something back from spilling. I noticed and asked what was wrong. He'd always say, "Nothing, I just love you," and each time, I let it go. I had enough on my plate already. I had no idea what he was actually carrying. Here's what I knew about Daniel Cross. I heard his name exactly once, by accident. I was 9, digging through a hallway closet for scissors, when I found a manila envelope addressed to my mother in unfamiliar handwriting. Marcus rounded the corner and snatched it from my hands in one quick motion. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at me and said, "That's not yours to see." Then he hid it somewhere I never managed to find. That night I asked my mother who Daniel Cross was. She said, "He was no one, the way you say a name you're trying to strip of meaning." At 14 I tried again. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and explained that my biological father had been troubled, that he'd made bad decisions, that the court reviewed everything and ruled in my best interest, that Marcus was my father now and had been since I was 7. And that was the only thing that mattered. She wasn't unkind about it. She was simply shut down, the way someone becomes after years of practicing the same silence. I stopped asking after that. Here's what actually happened, pieced together the way I eventually learned it. Daniel Cross and my mother met in the early 90s. They were together for 3 years, happy in the unremarkable way that doesn't make for dramatic stories because nothing went wrong. My mother has since told me she loved him completely, without hesitation, the most honest she's ever been with me about anything. I was born in 1994. Daniel was there, present and, by every account, joyful. He assembled my crib himself from a flat-pack kit, spending an entire weekend putting it together piece by piece. I didn't learn that until I was 31. They split up when I was almost 2. Daniel stayed involved. He drove across town every Friday without fail to pick me up. He paid child support before any court required it. By every reasonable measure, he was trying. Then Marcus entered the picture. My mother was 27, lonely in ways a toddler couldn't fill. Marcus was attentive and spoke about the future with a confidence she hadn't felt in a long time. She fell for him, and I believe that was real. What I can no longer believe is that she understood what he would do next. When I was 6, Marcus pursued full custody. He claimed Daniel was unfit, backed by testimony from 2 witnesses who painted him as volatile, dependent on alcohol, and sometimes threatening. Those witnesses lied. I wouldn't learn that for 25 years. Daniel, unable to afford the lawyer Marcus had hired, sat in that courtroom with an overworked public defender, juggling 17 other cases, watching a false version of himself get constructed piece by piece, powerless to stop it. He lost custody. He lost visitation rights. Eventually, through a follow-up proceeding, he lost his parental rights entirely, stripped away based on fabricated testimony. Legally and officially, he was erased. He told me later that he stood outside the courthouse for a long while after it ended. Unsure where to go, he had his truck, a job in custom cabinetry on the east side, and a 1-bedroom apartment where one of my drawings still hung on the fridge, held by a magnet shaped like a state souvenir he'd bought just to make me laugh. He drove home. He kept the drawing. He kept everything. He never gave up looking for me. In 2009, he hired an investigator who found an address. He sent a letter. It never reached me. He kept writing for years. Letters that landed in the wrong hands or nowhere at all. He saved copies in a shoebox. 8 months before my wedding, my mother sat across from me in my kitchen and told me the truth. She cried, not theatrically, just steadily, the way people cry when a long-carried weight has become part of who they are. She admitted she'd learned about the false witnesses back in 2006. Marcus told her himself, believing it would reassure her, make her feel protected. She'd carried that secret for 20 years. "I'm sorry, Vivian," she said. "I know it's not enough." She was right, it wasn't. But it was the first honest thing she'd ever told me about any of it. And that changed everything that followed. I didn't tell Caleb right away. I was still processing it, unsure how to even hold it. But he sensed I was carrying something new. He never pushed. He just stayed close, the way he always did. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out until the doorway, was that 6 weeks before the wedding, Caleb had come home one afternoon after meeting Daniel Cross in person. My mother had been quietly in touch with Daniel since the previous fall. She told him about the wedding in February, gave him the venue, the date, the time, and asked if he wanted to come. He said yes instantly, without a moment's pause. They kept it from me. My mother made that choice on purpose. She later said she wasn't sure I'd allow it, and she feared that if I refused, I'd come to regret it. She said she'd watched me spend my entire life shielding myself from pain, and she knew from her own experience that some forms of self-protection are just distance wearing a disguise. She was probably right. I likely would have said no, and I likely would have regretted that decision. It doesn't fully resolve things, but it's where we ended up. The night before the wedding, Caleb held my hands and said, "There are things happening that I believe will turn out okay. I need you to trust me." I stared at him. "That is the least comforting sentence you've ever said to me." He almost smiled. "I know, I'm sorry, just trust me." I said okay, because I did trust him, but I barely slept that night. The morning of the wedding, my mother brought me tea without me asking, holding my hand a moment longer than necessary as she passed me the cup. She looked at me like she was committing something to memory, like a long goodbye or a long hello. I couldn't tell which. "You look beautiful," she said. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked. "Nothing," she said. "I just love you. That's all." The processional began. Marcus stood at the entrance. My sister stood beside him, arm looped through his, head tilted in that familiar, fragile way. And that's when I understood what was happening. My mother stepped close and caught my wrist before I could move. "She's going through a breakup," she said. "Don't make this harder." I stood frozen in the doorway in my dress, and for a moment I was 9 years old again, holding a manila envelope and being told it wasn't mine to see. Then a man stepped forward from the edge of the hallway. He looked to be in his late 50s, silver threading through his hair, dressed in a dark suit that looked recently and carefully chosen. He offered his arm without a word, no explanation, no apology, just a steady, quiet invitation, like he'd rehearsed this moment for years. And something inside me understood before the rest of me caught up. I took his arm. When Marcus turned and saw who was walking beside me, all the color left his face. The room went utterly still, the music continued, and we walked. I don't remember every step. I remember the weight of the bouquet. I remember the hush of the room. I remember Caleb waiting at the end of the aisle, his expression shifting into something complicated and tender as he watched us approach. I remember reaching the front and Daniel leaning in to whisper, "I've been trying to get here for a long time." I couldn't speak, so I just squeezed his arm. Marcus left before the reception ended. He didn't say goodbye to me. He said something to my mother on his way out that she's never repeated, and I've never pushed her to. Some things can wait. My mother sat with Daniel at a corner table for over an hour. I watched them from across the room. I don't know what passed between them, but she was crying, and he was nodding, and at one point she rested her hand on the table and he covered it gently with his own. Caleb found me watching them. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders. "I'm sorry I kept it from you," he said. "I didn't want to take the choice away from you, but I also didn't know how to bring up something that enormous in the middle of everything else." I leaned into him. "You knew before I did," I said. He nodded. "Your mom called me. She needed someone to help make sure he made it through the door. She wasn't sure she could manage it alone." I looked at him. "You are a very strange and very good man," I said. He kissed my temple. "You looked beautiful walking down that aisle." "I had a good partner," I told him. "Daniel and I have met 4 times since the wedding. We get coffee. We talk carefully. We're 2 people trying to navigate 29 lost years with honesty, even when it isn't easy." He still has the drawing. He brought it to our second meeting tucked in a clear sleeve and set it quietly on the table between us. It showed a house with a sun in the corner and 2 stick figures standing out front. One small, one tall, with a caption underneath in crooked 4-year-old handwriting. It said, "My dad." I'm not sharing this story because it wrapped up perfectly. I'm sharing it because I spent 31 years believing a version of myself that someone else had written. And the day I finally let someone hand me the truth, even in a doorway, even without warning, it reshaped everything I thought was possible. I walked down that aisle with my father. Late, but not too late. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't always arrive on schedule, but when it finally does, it doesn't wait for an invitation. It simply steps forward, offers its arm, and you hold on.